Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Need Some Introduction. Today, specifically, we're here to discuss the season finale, the eighth episode of Paradise, the Hulu series, just renewed recently for a season two. It's been growing week to week. We can see it in the download numbers as well. So, a very popular show. Darren's here with me, I should say, to co host with me this week again.
Yep. Greetings.
Early morning for him, late night for me. A few show notes. One is just a reminder, if you haven't subscribed to our YouTube channel, I'd like to see a video episode. We're up at 81 subscribers now, so a lot of progress we've made, but it is trickling now. I think we're getting like one a day. So anybody who wants to see that a little quicker, reach out to us there. Given the timeline, we're probably looking at maybe a video review of the end of Severance, which would be pretty exciting to do. See if I get my wife on board with that as well. Their first appearance on the podcast. And I have a couple of show notes specifically to our coverage of Paradise. One is I got an email from Nadia, and I want to say thank you, Nadia, for mentioning the fact that I had mentioned it was a little cynical for them to be thinking about the Electoral College, talking about how they were going to lose Florida. And she pointed out correctly that this was a little gallows humor that they're talking about the last time they lost Florida, as in the election when they lost Florida. So this was a different kind of humor, or maybe a different kind of cynicism, I should say, where they were making a joke about like, we're going to lose Florida again. Much more severe version of losing Florida. Thanks for pointing that out. I had kind of missed that. I don't know how I missed that. That was a pretty obvious joke, but I did not catch it on our coverage here. And the second thing I want to mention is that Darren, we got a 4-star review. Appreciate this 4-star review, by the way, on Apple Podcasts from Wardster25. The title is Nearly Perfect, but too much political side conversations in our coverage of Paradise. And I think I'm mostly responsible for that. And I would say two things to that. In my defense, it's a little hard to watch a show about billionaires having too much power in our political process in the current climate and not make some commentary. However, that being said, I definitely threw in multiple jokes in there that were specifically referencing people in the current political situation, which is what he called out, like saying, like, I don't need to listen to a podcast about Paradise to hear about current politics. So point well taken. I'll do a better job of that. And by the way, for people who don't know this, I also edit the podcast, so I could easily make the joke to Darren and then cut it out of the podcast if I wanted to. So maybe in the future, if I want to get a little dig in right now, I'll just cut it out. But
some of these jokes that you cut out as well, I mean, they're just crackers too. 4 stars, not bad. I'm happy with 4.
Yeah, exactly. That's right. I do appreciate the 4 stars, by the way. I do appreciate, and that's a very fair grade. So thank you for that. And I do attempt to not talk about the headlines of the day, but I think thematically, when there's something explicitly, for example, on this week of the White Lotus, they're talking about people they didn't expect to vote for Trump. I really can't not talk about that when it's in the text of the show, obviously, right? And personal relationships with people regarding that very topic. But we could talk about the topic in general without making specific political swipes. So I take the point, and I do appreciate the 4-star review. Just a reminder, and you can watch this, of course, as well. I haven't seen any of this, but it premiered tonight, or it's premiering right now as we're speaking, the Daredevil episode 1 and 2, which is supposed to be very good. I'll probably check it out and give my opinion next week, but haven't seen any of it yet, but I am curious. But more importantly, Andor. So I mentioned there's 12 episodes of Andor, which there is. It starts on April 22nd, so we will be covering at that point. But I mentioned to you that if you think about the structure of Andor season 1, you basically had these 3 episode chunks that were basically a movie. Well, apparently, this season of Andor is written the same way. And yes, we have 12 episodes of Andor, but Darren, we get 3 episodes a week for 4 weeks. That's the release.
Oh, that's epic. So we're basically getting 4 Star Wars movies in 4 weeks.
In 4 weeks. Exactly.
That is insane. I'm really looking forward to it. That's a lot of watching. We're going to have to set aside a couple of big nights to watch these episodes. My God, that's awesome.
It's funny though when I read that article in Deadline last week announcing this with the actual release schedule. It literally the day after we discussed this, that when we recorded, I'm like, oh, I'm gonna have to correct that on the podcast next week. But it was very funny to read it because first of all, I'm like, wow. If this thing's going to run for 12 weeks, it's going to eat up the whole entire summer. And I'm looking at other shows that we might cover along the way. So I'm like, oh, good. It's all runs down to a month, so we can move Alien Earth and other things around that we're definitely going to be covering on the podcast. So it makes more room. But like you mentioned, I'm like, this is like 3 hours I have to watch and then cover. These episodes are going to be like 2.5 hours long. We'll cross that bridge when we get to it.
That's epic. Well, yeah, I'm very much looking forward to that. Hopefully, it can hold a candle to last season, which was so good, such an enjoyable watch.
I have a lot of confidence in that. All right, Darren. So we got to the finale of season 1 anyway. Many unanswered questions here in the episode, which, by the way, is called The Man Who Kept the Secrets. We jump 12 years back. I love these flashbacks, by the way. I got to say that there's something intentional or unintentional that really works well with the show in making us stuck in this McMansion community that every time we escape it, it's like, ooh, we go outside. It's awesome.
First impressions. Love this episode. Loved it. Coming off the back of the last episode, which was one of the best pieces of TV I've seen in quite a while. It was a tough ask, but I really enjoyed it. Maybe I didn't love this episode, but I really enjoyed it. And I thought it wrapped up the series very satisfactorily. But yes, this flashback, such a great piece of storytelling, the economy of storytelling. It reminded me of the start of the movie Up, where they show this these people's relationship in just such a short space of time. They introduce the character, and possibly a love story. We're not quite sure.
I know, like untouched on, but definitely feels like that. I agree.
Yeah. You have sympathy for this guy, and he's a very likable guy, and he's doing an honorable job, and he's a leader of men, and he looks after his workers. And I thought it was ambitious to bring in this character right at the end to say that he's the cause of all this trouble, and we're on board with it. Yeah, what did you think?
I was a big fan as well. This isn't as excellent as last week. Absolutely concur with that. But I like the fact that I can imagine a version of this where it is the series finale, I should say, where they didn't get a second season, where we end on the same beat. I won't break down the very final moments here yet, but you could end up on the same beat where there's like the light hits his face and the future has possibility, and they would trim out some of the unsolved mysteries out of the last episode, like kind of dangling storylines. And that's it. You get the finale of season 1. But, we'll leave it for the end. I do think they leave enough questions for what could possibly happen in a season 2 that would be satisfying. And they also resolve this particular mystery, the murder of Cal, and I think in a pretty satisfying way. Like thematically, it ties in. It brings in this character we knew nothing about, but in one episode, in this bottle episode, practically, as far as this one character is concerned, explains his motivations. And by the way, he's been there the whole time. We just didn't realize it, right?
Was he in the first episode?
Well, we've seen him a couple of times. Like basically every time we've been in a library, we've seen him. The scene they replay, obviously he's there, but there's another time, I think, when Jeremy is there in the library as well. The episode when I suspected correctly, by the way, gonna pat myself on the back here, about the Dewey Decimal System.
Yeah. I was a big supporter of you when that was revealed. I was like, yes.
And but the reason I suspected that at that point in the show, which was whatever episode 4 or 5, was when they were walking around the library together, and then we had also seen that the grandfather mentioned that they used to leave notes in the books between him and his wife. So in that particular episode, we had also seen him there. So he's been kind of in the background in multiple episodes up until now.
Yeah, we did mention him in past episodes, but I'd be very interested if he was in the first episode, and also whether his wife, She was definitely in one of the early episodes when talking about the cheese fries.
Oh, absolutely. She's been there numerous times. Yeah. She's been like practically the waitress we've seen practically the whole entire time.
Yeah.
I guess you know what, when you
Always,
live in
always
paradise,
eating.
what else do you have to do there, right? So she could be there most of the day. Think about it. You could just walk to your house, and if someone wants to get gravy fries, just walk back down the street to the. What else you got to do?
The flashbacks have been great all season, and this is another great flashback and quite touching. And you're also
Yes.
introducing old mate from Wakanda, as they tease him about.
Yeah, exactly. Now I'm going to forget his name, but it wasn't that uncommon a name, by the way. And that, but now I won't be able to recall it. So that just goes to say that, you know what? Let's just call him Adam after all.
Yes, that's right.
And we see that flashback that Trent does try to pronounce his name at least. And there is not only this, like you mentioned, up this kind of building of this friendship, or maybe even a romance between these two, maybe an unfulfilled romance. I also think about, I'm an immigrant here in the country, and I think about this being almost the fantasy, the ideal. Like my parents still cling to this version of the melting pot of America, right? Trying to join this group of people where you're the outsider, but then over time you become part of that culture. Definitely think that is like in microcosm. They're telling that story of this particular character. And then, of course, only to find out that these people are probably getting killed by the blasting of these rocks.
Yeah, so the blasting of the rocks is releasing some dust that is poisonous to your lungs. So that often can happen. Yeah, he gets turfed out of his job pretty quickly, and the project goes on.
When he finds this out, they say, "Oh, we'll talk about it tomorrow." And of course, his badge no longer works. But of course, he's afraid. The I can't remember the engineer's name here, head engineer or the architect of this whole thing, is afraid. He's like, they're going to kill me too. So I, just keep this quiet, and you're lucky it's not worse for you. But this radicalizes him, right? And this eventually leads to him working his way in to get close to Cal so that he can attempt the assassination. So I was wrong that Billy was a sniper, because they kept calling him sniper, and his dad was saying you couldn't do it on your own. They had to orchestrate this, which I thought meant that we had actually seen Billy as the sniper, and that was a way to earn sympathy and potentially get him reelected. But actually, it turns out, no, it was someone with a personal grievance. He knew what was happening, and he was shouting out. We see it in the previous episode as well. They deserve to know, or everybody deserves to know, something like that.
The mystery of the flower just was solved very quickly. We see all the workers with the flower on their back, and
exactly.
Yeah, so it wasn't a conspiracy after all.
It's interesting that they kind of put these tantalizing threads in there that, like, what is this? What is this organization of the Rose from the outside world? And this is Cal's dad behind it, which of course they're putting these things in there so people can spin up different conspiracy theories. But no, it just turns out that this guy ends up working at the library there eventually by ruthlessly murdering the librarian who's heading there and his wife.
Ooh.
And
yeah, that was a good scene, wasn't
it? It was. And I do wonder about, like, what would you do in that circumstance? These people are probably going to die. Actually, they're not going to die, right? Because they're going to go in, and then you basically have to make the decision. Is it me or them? I guess if it's just yourself, you would think, well, do I deserve to live more than this couple? But of course, he also wants revenge, right? He's going in there to kill Cal. He wants to finish what he started, as he says.
Yeah, and it was very cool the way the prison system broke down pretty quickly, and all the prisoners revolted and got out. I mean, that's the whole story in there that could be interesting to explore. But I thought his makeshift security or police uniform was pretty basic.
Yeah, exactly.
But it worked to get those two out of the car, and then he could brutally murder them.
Hey, you know what? You're stuck in traffic. They may not even make it there, considering how much traffic there's there. It's probably not only the people who are actually, unsuspectingly probably planning to go in there over the course of months, and now they're all rushing there. There's probably just people in the area that know exactly what's going on. And of course, everybody will be heading towards that mountain trying to get in there when they know that the end is nigh.
Yeah, I thought it did stretch credibility a little bit that he could find people with the credentials, murder them, get to a service station, petrol station, gas station, whatever you guys call it, and shave his head perfectly,
yes,
to match the ID, and then find a willing person to be his wife. I thought it was 4 hours maybe he could do all that and then get to the checkpoint, convince the person at the checkpoint. But
Yep.
yeah, we'll go with it. It's such a good story.
It strains credibility. I 100% agree. Although it does make sense as well. You could kind of connect those dots, like you mentioned. First of all, it's a huge coincidence. He even says so, that it's like, well, luckily they put me right here in the worst prison in America. Just happens to be right next to where they're building the compound. Seems like even if that was the case, you'd probably want him far away from the president, considering he, tried to kill him, and that's where he's going to end up at some point in the future. But it's very believable that you could, in a prison, whenever you've seen actual riots in prisons, the prisoners outnumber the guards. So if they really are tenacious, it's not that hard to overpower them. And that's exactly what happens pretty quickly when you think about these people trapped in a cage waiting to just die. And also how vested are these guards who are also trying to escape to protect themselves in defending the prison at all. Then he just happens to be nearby. He heads right back to where he worked. He's walking up the street and goes, hey, I could pass myself as this guy. This guy's like 6'5" or something, considering when you see him walking around in this. So he just probably had to find the really tall guy. He happens to be bald though, but he's like, that's all right. I'll shave my head. Has he been shaving his head for 12 years? That's a lot of maintenance there.
It really is. That's especially that shape as well. But yeah, he's a big unit, isn't he?
Indeed. It's funny when he sneaks up on this is much later in the episode, but when he sneaks up on Xavier, he knocks him out and he goes, wrong place, wrong time. And then of course he says right place, right time when he runs into that girl who's at the 7-Eleven, and he needs someone to pretend to be his wife. So she just happens to pick her up there, and lucky for her, I guess. I mean, better than death, I assume. Although maybe these people didn't die, though. There's a whole question as to whether these people actually would have died, I should say.
That's true. That is very true.
So we jumped ahead there in the reveal of the character, but of course, very interesting to have this guy have a full backstory, which I do appreciate. Like oftentimes on these shows, you kind of introduce somebody and they'll just kind of have their villain speech at the last moment to explain themselves, and that's it. But no, they spent time developing this character. They give him practically this whole episode.
And the actor does a good job as well. He's a little bit comedic as well, which probably makes you feel for him.
Right.
And be on his side.
Yeah, I think he did a really good job. And I wonder if he has the traditional male pattern baldness. He's pretending to shave his head. But no, we see him actually shave his head. I mean, if he's shaving his head, he's doing an excellent job.
As he says, he gets sucked into the life in paradise, and he becomes the librarian. He's not only impersonating the librarian, he becomes the librarian. That's when he is so shocked when Cal comes in.
Walks in.
In his bathrobe, drunk. So we thought the shock was something else, but the shock was actually brings back his former life as the sniper.
Exactly. He gets a PTSD right back into his previous agenda. But yeah, I actually thought that was really smart. I empathize with him when you're in a situation in your life where, it could just be like a job you do and you're like, well, I'm okay with this for the time being, but, I'm looking for something. And eventually you're like, well, is it so bad? And, they did give me a raise this year, and you kind of just, forget your original plans. So I think we all do that. And, that's the seductiveness of being in this place where they're offering you a comfortable life when who knows what's outside. It could be utter misery, or maybe not so miserable. We have to circle back to that when we see those notes at the end. We'll probably talk about Trent a little bit later again, but Sinatra and Xavier, we cut back to where we ended last episode. We were saying he should have shot her in the head. Guess what? Turns out he should have shot her in the head. Instead, she says, go check on your daughter. They release all the elites. They give them their guns back. This huge thing that would happen in real world gets all yada, yada. Robinson is just furious, going like, what are you talking about? What does she have on you? And he just says, my daughter. And everything goes back to the status quo. But I'm like, you know what? That's enough explanation. Let's get on with the plot.
Agreed. Yep. Fine. Get on with it.
Exactly. I didn't want to spend 10 minutes on it. They could have easily done that, negotiated and fought about it. I'm like, nope, we got to wrap up this whole season right now. I hadn't noticed before until we see him leave and drive away. But the circular layout of this neighborhood seems like a bad. If anyone's a civil engineer out there, I think this is a bad layout because each street is just getting wider and wider. I don't know who got the mail route on the outer loop, but that seems like a rough job.
Towards the end, the librarian, Trent is his name, is that right?
Yeah.
He does say that nothing has changed. The rich people still get the best houses.
Yes. Right.
And so maybe the poorer people are on the outer
on the fringe.
edges.
It's possible. Yeah. So maybe that's a metaphor for it, where you see like the consolidation of those big houses are in the middle, and then spread out from there. Not a bad theory, actually. Meanwhile, Jeremy is reading from the tablet, and he's starting to have almost a cult-like following here. Although that's not the indication. I think he doesn't seem to be heading in that direction, given where we land on this particular episode. Oh, I did like this scene, by the way, where Samantha's trying to bury all the evidence. Gabriella says to her, something's come undone. You've come undone. And I like that Samantha is just like, I've done terrible things. And she seems really regretful. And then she's just like, you're excused. I've done terrible things, and I don't want you getting in the way of me doing more terrible things. I do have to say that Julianne Nicholson here is doing a really good job of, I don't think this is a good character on the page. And I think she's done a pretty good job of making her somewhat believable as the monster that she is.
I agree.
And this conversation, or right after she dismisses Gabriella to Robbie, I should say, she gets a call from Jane. Jane's big concern here is, what do I do with the girl, and where's the we?
Let's talk about Jane, shall we?
Absolutely. Once again, I don't think this character is very well written, and they're trying to make her intriguing here because she's almost childlike in her fixation on wanting to play games. I don't buy that, considering how conniving she is in all of her other actions.
Totally childlike. Yeah, really the last shot of her when she's playing Wii tennis or whatever she's playing.
Exactly.
She's weakly written, possibly, or she's just there as a bit of a comedic beat because it's quite absurd. And I'm fine with that because, like I say, there is a bit of comedy in the show, and I'm fine with her being that kind of psychopath comedic character. Maybe, yeah, if there was a weak point, it's her, I think.
It's almost unfortunate they're bringing her back next year. Seems to be that they definitely want to bring her back at this point. I mean, maybe they'll develop her next season, because I was pretty disappointed with this character. It's hard to take her purely on comedic terms. When she killed Billy, not only killed him like, ruthlessly, could have just been like, I have to do my job, it's me or you. Really seemed to take some pleasure in murdering him, this guy that everyone was convinced she was in love with, including him. So it's very hard to try to read that in a comedic way, her character in a comedic way. Yeah, I don't know how to read this character, to be honest. I don't think she wanted to kill the daughter. Maybe there is some of that childlike affinity she feels for her. They did play Wii together. She might just need somebody else to play Wii with. So just that alone, right? I mean, she killed Billy. She needs somebody. And Cal's dead too. I mean, geez, who's she going to play with?
And she shot Sinatra, but she didn't intentionally kill Sinatra.
She kept her alive, exactly.
Yeah, so obviously she's got some plans that will lead into next season, but yeah, I'm not convinced.
With Sinatra alive, she can blackmail her. She can be a tool for Sinatra. Sinatra knows her true agenda. If Sinatra's gone, what power does she have? She's been playing like doe-eyed this whole entire time. And if she starts murdering people or blackmailing people and becoming a sociopath down there, it's a pretty small population. They're going to track her down pretty quickly. Her only power is to keep Sinatra alive. And rule of thumb, by the way, when interacting with a psychopath, do not say, "Are you crazy?" Especially with a really judgmental tone. She hangs up on her immediately. We do see in the flashback Cal once again. We find the CD. Well, actually, I guess it's flipping back and forth, right? Because we see the flashback to Xavier being with Cal with all the CDs, and then he's actually going through them. He finds the CD for Jeremy, which of course is the playlist with a little extra audio from Dad that is apparently enough of a breadcrumb to get him to figure this out by going back to the library. Now, we see a lot of Bruce Springsteen CDs here, but no covers. Bruce Springsteen covers this whole entire season.
And that was teased quite early in the season as well, and he teased the cover that is played in this episode. So everything was teased So yeah, the little breadcrumbs that they've been laying all paid off in this episode.
Yeah, I was a little disappointed. I mean, it makes sense that they circle back to that, Another Day in Paradise, perfect song for the beginning. And of course, here we are at the end when we discovered what's actually happened in paradise. But a little disappointed that we didn't get yet another song. I wanted another one.
I wanted another one too, and yeah, the moody cover of this is Genesis. Is it? It wasn't very satisfying. Just yeah, by the numbers, moody cover again.
Yeah. I don't know if it's the same cover or just a more dramatic aspect of it, but like at the end, it really was a little too much for me, and particularly. I think it's a Phil Collins solo, by the way. I could be wrong about that, but I'm pretty certain it is. Yeah. There's very little prog rock in that particular song. But then again, Genesis kind of lost that aspect of themselves towards the end also. So.
A little bit before my time.
Only slightly, my friend, only slightly. My next note here is just interesting to see that, of course, the workers, we noticed it earlier, they have the rose on their jackets themselves. So I guess maybe the workers were from Kane's construction company, right? Like that's probably where his business was foundational around construction, I believe. So in honor of his wife, probably he puts this rose on their uniforms. We see the uniform in the library. It's like, oh, is it somebody in the library, or was it one of the workers who snuck in at some point? Turns out it's both.
Yeah, I thought we'd see Kane more in this episode, because he could definitely be someone that could power the storyline in the next season.
I assume he's going to come back. Gerald McCraney, the actor, is going to come back in the next season. He probably has, I mean, he's demented, but that could be a good way to have him leak secrets as well along the way. I did like when Robinson shows up at Tarabi's house to kind of unravel this, that Tarabi's still like, those are private files. I can't show them to you. I'm like, do you realize how things are unraveling out there? Like, do you think things are going to just go back to normal now after this situation? But anyway, she does convince her that nut allergy gave away the waitress. That's a lot of nut-based cheese that she is handling pretty well.
Yeah, good old Tarabi. She's getting day drunk, but she can still find that little clue there. Yeah.
That doesn't make any sense. I've eaten cheese fries with that lady multiple times, and these cheese fries are not made out of cheese. And then, of course, the Wee Decimal System is the clue, and he figures it out. Interestingly, I completely forgot about this, but they have it on the previously on scenes. Cal calls himself Peter Lawford, and just so cultural context, this is before my time, even my time, even an old man like me, this is before my time. But in the original Ocean's 11, Sinatra is the George Clooney character, basically, in the original Ocean's film. Not a very good movie, by the way. Ocean's 11, the Steve Soderbergh movie, awesome, fantastic, one of my favorite films. But original Ocean's, just okay. But anyway, Sinatra is the lead. And he mentions that he's not even Dean Martin, which is like his dad. His dad is Dean Martin. He's just Peter Lawford. And Peter Lawford was like the tertiary character, like the kind of forgotten character. And that's what Cal feels like. He's just like hanging on to Ocean's 11. He's barely in the movie. But importantly, Peter Lawford's biography is called The Man Who Kept the Secrets, which of course is the title of this episode as well.
And it's a real biography.
A real biography, yes, it is. And cool. So it's interesting that when he finds the book or that area, he sees the Sinatra book, and he's like, no, not Sinatra. It's Lawford. And of course, right in there, good thing there's no Peter Lawford fans down there. Even with a population of 25,000, maybe somebody would be. Could you imagine just going in there going like, oh yeah, I just saw Ocean's 11. Want to read some biographies on these cast members. What is this?
Well, I think that original Ocean's 11 movie, that was just an excuse for all those guys to hang out in Vegas, wasn't it? I think shooting the movie.
It's just just a bunch of famous guys who already hang out in Vegas, but basically getting this whole thing paid for.
Yeah.
But I mean, that's what the appeal of the new Oceans is too, right? Just seeing all these fancy guys hang out together. And so it's just a different generation.
I'll have to rewatch that movie. I haven't seen that in a long time, but I remember it fondly.
The original or the remake?
The remake, yeah, the George Clooney, Brad Pitt one.
Oh, I highly recommend it. By the way, the director of Conclave apparently looks like he has signed up to do Ocean's 14 and Ocean's 12 and Ocean's 13. 13's okay. Ocean's 12 really doesn't work for me at all. Anyway, having the gang back together is going to be pretty fun. But Ocean's 11 is so much fun. It's such a blast.
Yep.
this librarian gets the jump on Xavier. I don't know about this. I mean, is it really that stealthy? This is not this unit, as you described him. Doesn't seem like it would be that stealthy. But there is that library carpeting, and he does have experience as a librarian for 12 years now. Librarians can be pretty stealthy, I guess, used to having to be quiet. But I can usually tell when someone's standing directly behind me, and I'm not a Secret Service agent. Oh, and of course, we see not only a flashback to how Trent got to the compound. Do you think, I mean, you already mentioned this briefly, but the freak out, just being able to get through security by freaking out, on the one hand, that seems that really stretches credulity. But on the other hand, I can imagine it's like, okay, we got to get everybody into the mountain. There's a giant wave coming. We have to close whatever the entryway they have within the next hour or 2 hours or whatever happens to be. So maybe these people are just like, just come in. We'll figure it out afterwards.
Yeah, I think so, especially with all hell breaking loose left, right, and center. And I mean, yeah, I don't know if you've ever tried to sneak into a festival with a broken wristband, but there's ways that you can do it if you have the right attitude. And he obviously, it's life or death, and he just wants to get through. And his wife didn't need to show her wristband at all. So
yeah,
they
how did she get it?
Just went straight through.
He just started to panic, and she's just like, "Get out of my way! I don't want to deal with this." The squeaky wheel gets the oil.
You can see, I mean, that worker, she's just like, well, the sooner everybody gets in, the sooner I can get in.
Exactly. Absolutely. I don't want to die either. Exactly. Yeah. It's more believable for sure. I'm like, I'm not going to die for you people. Come on in. I want to go down below as well. And just to circle back, he's really become comfortable in his new life. Maybe I can just accept this. And then Cal shows up, and it becomes the trigger for him to become vengeful again. Which is funny when you think about Cal thinking that his life's at risk. So he goes to make this breadcrumb trail for Jeremy and Xavier, and ends up triggering his own death inadvertently.
Yeah, it's a really good sign, I think, when you want to go back to previous episodes just to refresh yourself, to see how they've laid out these breadcrumbs. I think that's a really good sign of a well-made kind of set of episodes, because you can see the reaction as you're watching it the first time, and then the reaction as things become clearer later on. You're like, And
then we see another montage of this really rough last day for Cal. We've seen all this in the previous episodes, but he gets rejected by Robinson. He gets scolded by Sinatra. His son doesn't show up for dinner. His dad tells him that he didn't achieve anything in his life. Xavier says, "I'll rest when you're dead." And we see this all compiled together, and he's having his cigarette on the patio. By the way, Trent sneaks up on Xavier, and Trent, this 6'5", doesn't look like he's working out on a regular basis, to be honest, has somehow snuck up on Cal. Maybe Billy did deserve to die because he was a really bad security guard. How did this guy get into the house?
Are they playing Wii already, or they need to wait?
And that's what I was thinking. Maybe they've already turned. I mean, they've already turned off the security system, right? So they probably are already playing Wii at this point. But they don't have anyone on the outside, like checking the grounds. Like, and did he climb up? But Reacher can do it. We were caught up on the Reacher show. Reacher can climb in and out of that window all the time. But I don't know if I'm not sure Trent has that kind of upper body strength.
No, they probably both weigh the same. They're both gigantic.
Differently proportioned, though. the weight distribution is a little different.
And what a brutal murder scene, too.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that he survives it at first. I had mentioned earlier that it was strange to see those blood streaks. And I'm like, how did those blood streaks get from the patio into the, where his body was found? And he must not have died right away, but then how did he get those streaks? And then you had mentioned, and I thought it was a good explanation, that maybe it was like blood dripping as the killer escaped or something. But actually it turns out he was hit on the patio and then dragged inside. So even those little details they've accommodated for here, which I thought was well done, except for this guy just turning up super stealthy Trent, always sneaking up behind.
And it was quite poetic that the murder weapon was like a tool drill bit for.
It's like a drill, a drill for what they were excavating.
To get justice for his worker brothers.
That's right. Revenge is
lover possibly.
And lover possibly. Exactly. Or it could be unrequited. We don't know. Exactly.
Yeah, it did feel like that.
It's felt pretty unrequited, but possible. And then in the present tense, we see that Trent has taken the book, of course. He says, thanks for this. Has done a really good job of tying up Xavier there. He's no novice at this, apparently. Maybe he's got some kinks we don't know about. Who knows? It turns out that Robinson, who's already talked to his pseudo wife, is now showing up at the library, of course, has her own parallel investigation. I like when Xavier's trying to explain what's happening. She's like, I know. We got there at the same time. Different route, same resolution.
And as a viewer, you know it all anyway. So let's continue the chase. Let's go.
And of course, this book is more than just some notes about what's happening on the outside or some, his investigation. It's like step by step. This is how you exit the facility. Here's how you fly the plane. I do have a question about how he knows how to fly the plane, but his dad was a pilot, so maybe he got some experience from him.
Yeah, his dad was the first black commercial pilot or something like that, which I remember from
right
early on. Episode. Yeah, so that was quite sweet that comes back full circle.
There's a lot of ideas of fate in this show, and for example, Cal showing up at the worst possible time, or right place, right time, wrong place, wrong time. And then, of course, Xavier is the best candidate for this because he can fly the plane and he can, he has all of these different experiences that led him to be the best candidate to make this exit at the end. But of course, this is where Trent is trying to exit to. And this is pretty tragic to see Trent's demise here. And you see him falling. It's not commented upon until he goes to talk to Sinatra and says he's like splattered on someone's roof. Like, wouldn't this be big news? It's raining man. Like someone would have said, someone just fell off the roof. You figured that the word would have gotten out that someone had plunged from the highest rafters and splattered onto someone's roof. But Sinatra doesn't know about it.
Great death scene.
Yes.
Great shot of him falling through the fake sky.
Yes.
I really liked that. We knew him for so little, and we saw everything, his whole story in one episode.
I think they did a great job, like you mentioned, of developing him and giving him his pathos and his motivations in this really abbreviated amount of time. It's a tragic ending. I really felt the weight of it there at the end, even though, he's a villain in a lot of ways. We didn't want to see Cal die. We prefer to have Cal alive right now. His view of what Cal did is maybe a little simple, although Cal probably did the wrong thing, right? We could talk about that at the end, about who did the right thing and the wrong thing over the course of the show. You understand his motivations, and you understand that he was a little guy and his friend was even more so, used up and discarded, and he felt that was cruel and he wanted revenge.
Yeah, and I don't know if it's bold storytelling, but it just felt really great just to introduce someone right in the finale.
Yeah.
It just worked for me.
Xavier goes to talk to Sinatra to fill her in on all of this. She's a little confused by this story, but of course, most importantly, he wants to know, where is Presley? Now, given the terse conversation Sinatra had with Jane earlier on, she actually thinks that she's killed Presley. And that's what she tells him. Not only that, she obviously intends to kill him. You can't keep him alive after saying, I accidentally killed your daughter. Man, cold as ice, by the way. Xavier pretends to cry, but he's actually just pulling out his gun, shoots them all, a couple of headshots, and then, of course, one more time has a chance to dispatch Sinatra.
Oh, you thought he was pretending, did you? I thought that was real emotion, and then he could just switch straight away and just demolish those two heavies.
I mean, I think that he had an emotional reaction, but I think that was his plan, going in there, that he was going to. When he's ready to kill her, he's cold as ice at that moment.
So good. Oh, yeah. Yeah. That's what we want from Xavier when he needs
Absolutely,
to be.
Yeah. Exactly. You could make interesting parallels, by the way. This is a whole side tangent here, because I think that the Jane character, who of course shows up here as well, you could make interesting parallels between Xavier, who obviously has this attachment to his family and to his wife, but is also pretty cold and pretty calculating all the time. And you have Jane, which is the emotionless and just this cold, calculating machine. There could be an interesting duality there if these characters actually were in the same room together at some point and they could explore each other's personalities. But like you've mentioned in a couple of episodes, Jane is the worst underdeveloped character here by a mile. Maybe she will find something she cares about beyond the we in the next season, and she will develop a personality and some humanity of some kind.
Yeah, I think you're saying that she's childlike. I think that's maybe a key to it all. So, yeah, looking forward to a flashback of her backstory.
I would be very curious about a backstory for her. If they had an episode like, and they probably will, like they did here for Trent, to humanize her in a separate episode, or at least give us some understanding of her.
Something. Give us something else.
Speaking of Jane, she shows up. She rescues Sinatra by mortally wounding her, but she perfectly threading the needle that you're going to be on a ventilator. You'll probably be in a coma for a while. The whole world will change by the time you wake up, but you won't be dead. And that's when I'm going to need you. Also funny here, we talked about this before, other than that one flashback episode, we never see her family in the context of Paradise, except when she's on the ventilator.
Yeah.
In the final second.
It took me a while to work out why they're showing this random girl. I'm like,
exactly.
And then you see the partner, and you're, oh, okay, that's who they are.
That's right. That's who they are. I forgot she had a family. Maybe she forgot she had a family too. As you mentioned, Jane's psychotic impulses are momentarily assuaged by Wii tennis. We'll see how long that can last. Hopefully she has lots of Wii games if she gets bored with that one. Xavier goes back home and Presley's there. James is there. Carl's there. The dog's there. Everybody's safe. I guess the bartender's probably there too. I'm not 100% sure on that one. Probably. He might be back at the bar. Who knows? Everyone needs a drink after today.
Everyone definitely needs to get drunk.
Especially after today. His most loyal security is there at his house. It seems like they're there to protect him. They're still strapped. So they're a little wary. Like, who knows what's going to happen? Things are going to shake out. And he also has, of course, very important information there. Interestingly, we see the book, right? So we see, and I paused it so I can look at these notes. But some interesting things here. One is saying approximately 55 million survivors. So is that in the US? Is that global? If it's global, that's pretty horrible, right? But if it's in the US, that's not a bad starting point. I mean, it's less than a quarter of the population, but it's not a bad starting point for a new civilization. And some other things here we touched on last week. I was critical of the fact that, well, even given what the show is saying, where he has an EMP, society could restart at some point. There are people who are out there who can start stringing things back together. And I think that is what the show is going to explore next season, because on these notes, we see trade reestablished. Atlanta is one of the things it says. And we see major parts of the power grid reestablished. So the power grid's coming back online. Trade is starting again. There is probably some places where heavily impacted, obviously any place close to oceans, but some of the more interior spots might have done better. So some of those places are maybe coming back online. Life continues. So that kind of goes back to, I think, the theme of the show. Maybe they shouldn't have been so harsh to think, if we're unsafe or if this is something catastrophic is going to happen, we need to just think about ourselves in this small niche of this tiny population of selected people who are going to repopulate the planet. And instead, thinking about, well, if you'd given these people a heads up, even more of them could have found places to move to or had an escape plan. And maybe we would have had twice as many people survive. And they wouldn't have all died out there starving. They would have started to rebuild their communities. So I do think that is what the show's trying to say.
That's huge, isn't it? I mean, the show is called Paradise, so it's about these people trapped in a bunker. But if we're going to the second season, and really it's now about Xavier discovering the world that's left over. Yeah. But I did like those themes that you mentioned about maybe we should have thought about the greater good and the people that are possibly going to survive. So yeah, I don't know. I'm a little bit wary about showing too much of the outside world because because the show is called Paradise.
Right.
Yeah, I'm interested to see what's going to happen. But I don't want a kind of lone man walking through the post-apocalyptic landscape, which we've seen many, many times.
What if they have zombies, though?
Oh, exactly. Well, that's right. We haven't seen that before.
Well, if we throw zombies in there, it'll be the biggest show in the world. We already know what happens.
Maybe that's where they're going.
They have to. You have to throw zombies in there.
But I'm interested to see. I mean, quarter of the population of the US. That's a lot of people that have
Right.
survived. And speaking about the power grid coming back on, that means that there is plenty of action out there. It's not just a
Sure.
few lonely survivors
Right.
eating stray animals.
Right.
Yeah,
Mhm.
it's civilization. So maybe the Paradisians are
Right.
they're the outsiders.
Yes.
They're not the lucky ones.
I do think that there is a philosophical idea here. You isolate yourself and you have all this luxury, which is what paradise is. Everybody's thinking, well, how do we replicate the luxury we had as living in this sprawling White House and having all this infrastructure and having everything catered to us? And they're trying to replicate that in paradise because that's their threshold. Anything outside is like utter misery. Instead of the idea is like, yeah, there's a risk in going outside, but if you see people are rebuilding and trade has is beginning again in Atlanta, you assume trade between nations or at least from different regions of the country. Well, you might have to go out there and build it. Yeah, everything here is provided for you, but is it better to be in this fictional paradise
Mm.
than to be among the rest of the population? And I think that is the tension.
Yeah, and we were talking last week about how people pull together
Right.
in emergencies or in tough times. So maybe we can see that in the outside world, whereas in paradise, they really don't have to do much except, yeah, go and visit the bar and eat your cheese fries.
Cheese fries, that's it. Cheese
You
fries and
know, there's
beer. Doesn't sound bad, dare I say. And we, a lot of we. I mean, that's not commonplace, right? That was
a privilege.
yeah, exactly. Only Cal had the we. So I'm not sure why they couldn't have a couple more we's down there.
Yeah, and just following on from last week's conversation, we were talking about you were talking about hurricanes, and there's actually a cyclone that is due to hit quite a populous place in Australia, maybe today, tomorrow.
Wow.
So we've got friends near Brisbane who got hit a few years ago, and that destroyed their business. Their business was
Oh wow.
practically underwater. So they're all preparing now to see if this one is going to be as bad as the last one. So yeah, as you say, I mean the news reports are amping it up like anything else.
Right.
So we hope it's not going to be as bad as that.
And they're on the East Coast, right?
They're on the east coast, yeah.
Yeah.
So up Queensland, New South Wales border, which is a bit more tropical, and yeah, this thing is spinning quite large and it's about to hit land.
Well, hopefully they'll be safe. And I hope it's not as bad as they say it's going to be.
Yeah, we hope so.
Then we get to the very end of the episode. Robinson has to coax Xavier out. I'll watch your family. And the daughter gives approval as well. I mean, I understand where the daughter's coming from. It's like if you can go and rescue her, she'll just have to grow up a little bit faster. But I mean, it's worth it to try to get the family back together again, of course. In the bigger picture as well, of finding out what's in the outside world and maybe rejoining that outside world, getting the people down there who want to be able to. And I also like towards the very end, we see this really lovely message that Cal leaves for Jeremy saying that they say you are the things you love, which means that I am you and you are me, which I thought was very sweet. And saying you always were very critical of the decisions I made and the world that I left behind. Well, fix it. And maybe we see Jeremy becoming, who knows, the youngest president ever, perhaps. Well, let's see how that goes.
Yeah, the show does manage to make these sweet family situations. I do like Presley as a character. She seems very
Yeah.
mature. She's really taken on kind of not a motherly role, but like a leader role within the family to look after her brother. And it's not like she's a helpless child. And when she's hugging Xavier, it's very touching. And yeah, as you say, Cal and Jeremy's situation is tough, but ultimately touching at the end, which is what you want. You want to feel something with these shows.
Yeah, and that helps that they have that very dramatic version of Another Day in Paradise playing on the.
Despite, yeah.
Yeah, despite that, exactly. In spite of that. And then we get to the very end. Tarabi's eating her cheese fries. She loves those cheese fries. The billionaires are all milling around and yelling. This vice president, now president, pounds his fist on a table. He's ready to finally take control. Sinatra's on the ventilator. Her family's there. Finally, we see the family. Xavier gets on that plane and sets the coordinates. The hangar opens and the light hits his face, and he's ready to face the future.
Brilliant. How long have they been? How long has it been since the accident?
I
Do we
think
know?
it's 2 years, right? Is it two
Two
years?
years.
I think
Okay,
it's
so
been
the
two.
plane, all right. So the plane is not rotting away. It's probably still got fuel in it, and we can just say, well, let's go.
I assume they maintain it and they probably have people there to maintain the planes. Even you can imagine that even these billionaires as a backup plan, if the people show up with torches and pitchforks outside when they find out what's actually happening, you can only keep these type of things under wrap for so long, I think. So they probably knew that, and they're like, well, we may need to make an escape, or hey, if the world is not decimated, they might just want to go back. I think that they probably maintain the planes.
Okay, let's go with that. And the natural sunlight
Yeah.
hits Xavier's face, where at the beginning, the very beginning of the first episode, he wakes up to artificial sunlight.
Exactly. Yep. Exactly. It's a little bookend there to have real sun in his face for the first time in 2 years at this point.
Yeah, very good, very exciting. Quite enjoyed this series.
I had a lot of fun with this too. Is there anything specifically that you want to see in season two? We're going to see the outside world, by the way, just so you know. Sterling K. Brown gave an interview just today. There's been a lot of people doing interviews because the show obviously wrapped up today. And he mentions that he doesn't go into details, but he knows the 3-year plan, which was pitched originally. He's one of the producers here on the show. He mentions that season two is about finding out what happened in the outside world. We're definitely going to get that. But I agree with what you were saying before. This show is called Paradise. So are we going to forget the people inside? Are we going to see a lot of flashbacks? Maybe Cal can still be in the show. Would you like to see that?
More James Marsden, absolutely. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
for
right.
sure. Yeah, I mean, Xavier as a character is awesome.
Yeah,
I'm loving the portrayal. So it sounds like he's going to be kind of a lone man against the elements and against, I don't know, ravaging gangs on a quest to find his wife. He's obviously not going to run into her straight away, and that might
right.
be the whole season. The search for his wife and whether there's going to be more secrets, whether Sinatra's going to come back online.
Oh, Sinatra's definitely coming back.
Yeah, send people after him, or I don't know. But it's going to be interesting how they link him out there by himself with Paradise. I mean, there's no like two-way radio or anything. So, how are you gonna keep those themes together? That's a good point that you've made.
But I mean, theoretically, you could broadcast from Paradise too. They, of course, don't want to because they're afraid people will come and want to take their supplies. But I don't know if the world outside is not untenable. Then who does? Everybody can't go live in a mountain in Colorado. So I mean, maybe that's the push and pull of what's going to develop next season. I also would think it'd be pretty interesting to see him find his wife, which I assume he will, and then he's going to be like, now we have to go back and be a family again. And she's like, no, I got work to do over here, right? Just like she did before when they were married, right? So that's going to be just the same tension in the marriage again, even given the new circumstances. Does he want his kids to have to come rough it a little bit? And like you already mentioned, what is it going to be like out there? It's not all going to be kumbayas out there. I'm sure there will be people who are only in it for themselves. Even as things reestablish themselves, people are going to have power grabs and
Mm.
economic considerations. So it is going to be like the Wild West. Like, I mean, basically, not that this is going to be a zombie show, but all those zombie shows are basically Westerns. And hey, when society falls apart, it's like the Wild West again. Right? And so there's going to be some aspect of that. But I don't want that to be the whole show, like you mentioned. We need to have some connection to Paradise still.
We see that his wife, Xavier's wife, is a bit of a leader. We still don't know what she was doing in Atlanta as
Yeah,
some
exactly.
kind of top
Maybe
scientist.
some special project we don't know about.
And as you say, she probably would be very reticent to jump into paradise and play happy families, and maybe the paradisians coming out into the world, they might be rejected. It's like, well,
Right.
you've got your own thing in there. We don't really want to help you restart our society.
Right. And do the billionaires, I mean, if you just start with like new currency, for example, do the billionaires want to come outside? I'm like, I'm poor out there. I'm rich in here.
Yeah,
So I'll
yes.
keep it as is. I like the status quo. She might have a special machine that turns back time. We don't know.
In the foreign situation, I mean, the Russia and China land grab, I'm very
Yeah.
interested to see what happened there.
I mean, that EMP thing supposedly was global. So I guess they all have to start from scratch again.
And if there is a power grid back on, then the Earth hasn't gone back 500 years. So Cal
Right.
wasn't. Yeah,
Exactly.
he was talking it up a bit there.
Yeah. I have the power to set things back to the 1400s. I mean, that was such an overstatement on his part. I mean, we haven't had electricity for 500 years, Cal. You're good at trivia, but not so good at history, man.
Got to bring James Marsden back. I mean, he's
Sure,
been
of
so
course.
so fantastic. We need more. I don't know how they're going to bring him back in flashbacks, but
Minimally, he has to find, Jeremy has to find a stack of mixtapes that all have running commentary from his dad.
we've got to keep these covers going.
Oh, of
That's
course.
the one thing
Oh,
that has
they
to happen.
they have to have 80s covers the whole time. And maybe he progress to the 90s eventually, but yeah, we got to keep it going.
Yeah. Yeah, Jeremy has to continue that mixtape making.
And maybe we save it for next week. We can do a like mid-season check-in for Reacher, which I finally caught up on. I hadn't seen any of it. I think we're 4 or 5 episodes in. I binged the whole thing. What a silly show, by the way. But I am liking this show this season so much better than season 2. I like the comedy of the show, by the way, of him having to literally like bend people's legs the wrong way to tuck them away and stuff. So the show knows exactly the show it is. As a matter of fact, preparing for this conversation, I didn't even remember any of the plot revelations in the most recent episodes. It's a show that I forget as soon as I stop watching it. And then
Yep.
as soon as I start watching it again, it all comes back to me. It is very pleasant to enjoy this brutal, violent show. And I think they figured out this season, of course, the appeal of Reacher is being like a one-man army. Like that's what we want to see. He's got to be smart. He's got to be like Sherlock Holmes and Rambo, or maybe more specifically,
Mm.
Arnold Schwarzenegger in one person. And that's exactly what we get.
In a small town too. I feel like last season was in a bit of a city, and we weren't
Yes.
interested. It needs to be a small town. It needs
Yep.
to be genre specific music. Yeah, like you, I just binged it. It was great. Like even if I had spare half an hour, I just watch half an episode.
Right.
Doesn't matter. I mean, you don't
It
have to
doesn't matter. You don't even
follow.
remember the plot afterwards. It
It
doesn't
doesn't.
matter.
No. But then they had that last episode that had a great flashback
Yeah.
to one of his colleagues. I
Oh,
mean,
yeah. That was a good episode. Yep.
awesome. And he's just, yeah, one man wrecking ball, but he's funny. I mean, I was
Yes.
laughing out loud. My wife's like, what are you watching this stupid show for? I'm like, it's hilarious. She's like, we hear you cackling in the other room. But he's has some great one-liners, and he's so likable and brutal and satisfyingly brutal.
Yeah, it's such a weird recipe. I've watched the show before. I never really analyzed it, and I just think that it's such a weird thing to get right to pull off this kind of show where it needs to be a little stupid. Like if this was The Agency and the plot was so tight and so calibrated and so deliberate, he would look ridiculous in this show, right? Like the show has to be a little silly for him to work as this character. By the way, I laughed out loud when he's telling that guy that, hey, I don't bench press. That's stupid. I'm like, give me a break. This guy built that physique without lifting weights. What are you talking about? This guy's in the gym 4 hours a day. You're out of your mind. I don't. What does he just do? Push-ups? What are you talking about? You're out of your mind.
He gets the lavender ice cream. He just grabs and just chucks it.
Just
straight
throws
in the
away
bin.
immediately. Exactly. Yeah. Exactly.
Just heard a rumor that this Alan Richardson guy, he's in line to be the next Batman in James Gunn's DC universe. So I don't know how that's going to go, but sure, why not? Put him in everything.
Yeah, I mean the Batman character in the comics is a beefier guy, so it would kind of work in that way. For me, I think on the screen it needs to be somebody who can pull off, in a suit. He doesn't stand out, which is the funniest thing about this. I like the fact where they're like, "Don't worry, we talked to the guy at the toy shop. No one's going to remember you." It's like, hey, this guy walks into town, everybody remembers him. And in these type of shows, like in the 80s, if you want to correlate this to those action movies from the 80s, there was always usually some kind of, female nudity. A lot of bikini girls and a lot of like topless girls just gratuitously thrown into those Schwarzenegger movies or Sylvester Stallone movies. And the funniest thing about this show is I was just thinking about it in the most recent episode. I'm like, there is somebody who's being sexually objectified in the show. It's Reacher. Reacher is like, the TV show is constantly ogling him. It's like hilarious. It's just the funniest thing, which is part of the comedy of the whole thing.
And the women are all checking him out, and he's fine with it. And he's like, "Yep."
He does. He's just like, I know. Anyway, the whole show is hilariously silly, and I like the fact that they didn't have some big conspiracy. Like basically, season 2 lost me on the show. And by the way, anybody who knows about the Reacher novels, the first Reacher season is either the first book or the second book, very early in the Reacher series. And the second season was based on like the 8th or 9th book in the series, where of course like the stories get more complicated and they start bringing back characters from the earlier books, etc. And I thought it was such a miscalculation to go that deep into the mythology. I mean, they really needed to just do Reacher season 1 in a new town. That's all they need to do. And they figured it out, and they did it correctly this time around. Enjoyable for sure. All right, Darren, I will let you go. Thanks again for the conversation. And we'll be talking about, I think we'll be talking about Mickey 17 next week, and maybe talk about Reacher a little bit more too.
Okay, yeah, I'll do my best to check that out at the cinema. I haven't seen when it comes out here. Hopefully it does come out Thursday. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I don't even know. Yeah, that's a good point. We'll have to see how that all works out. If nothing else, we'll talk about Reacher. Reacher is very popular. So
exactly. Yeah.
All right. We'll talk to you soon.
All right. Cheers, Victor. Bye.
Thanks. Bye.